The caregiver's exhausted eyes met Ellen's across the studio as Greg Kinnear discussed playing a devoted family man in his latest film. Ellen was mid-conversation about the challenges of portraying unconditional love when she noticed the woman in the fourth row silently mouthing the words, "Help me," while clutching a worn medical bracelet. What happened next would prove that some of life's greatest performances happen not on movie screens, but in living rooms where children become parents to their parents. And love shows up in the most thankless, invisible ways. It was a serene Thursday afternoon at the Ellen DeGeneres show, and the studio buzzed with its characteristic warmth. 400 audience members had gathered to see one of Hollywood's most genuinely likable actors discuss his craft. Ellen, elegant in a cream-colored blazer with delicate pearl accents, was thoroughly enjoying her conversation with Greg Kinnear, who sat comfortably in the guest chair wearing a perfectly tailored gray suit, his familiar smile and easy manner filling the studio with the kind of authentic charm that had made him beloved across decades of film and television. "Greg," Ellen said, settling into the interview with obvious pleasure. "In this new film, you play a son who's caring for his aging father. That must have resonated with you personally, as someone who's talked about family being everything." Greg nodded thoughtfully, his expression taking on that sincere quality that made his performances so believable. "You know, Ellen, it's one of those roles that changed me as a person. Playing someone who's watching their parent fade away, trying to hold on to dignity and love when everything else is slipping away. It really opened my eyes to what so many people are going through quietly, every single day." The audience listened with the respectful attention Greg's sincerity commanded. This wasn't typical Hollywood promotion. This was a conversation about something universal and profound. "And the research you did," Ellen continued, "spending time in memory care facilities, talking to families. What did you learn about that kind of caregiving?" "That it's probably the hardest thing a person can do," Greg said without hesitation. "These adult children, mostly women, who give up their careers, their social lives, sometimes their own families, to care for parents who don't always recognize them anymore. They're heroes, Ellen. Invisible heroes who get no recognition, no applause, just the knowledge that they're doing what love requires." That's when Ellen noticed her. In the fourth row, slightly to the left, sat a woman who appeared to be in her early 50s. She had shoulder-length brown hair with visible gray streaks that she clearly didn't have time to color, and she wore a simple black cardigan over jeans. Her name was Linda Walsh, though Ellen didn't know it yet. What caught Ellen's attention was the way Linda was staring at Greg with such intense recognition, such desperate need, while slowly mouthing the words, "Help me," as tears streamed silently down her face. In her lap, Linda clutched a worn medical alert bracelet, the kind used for patients with dementia who might wander away and forget how to get home. Ellen's instincts, honed through 20 years of reading her audiences, told her this wasn't the emotional response of someone moved by a performance. This was the recognition of someone living the exact reality Greg was describing. "Greg," Ellen said gently, "hold that thought about invisible heroes for just a moment." Greg paused, following Ellen's gaze toward the audience. His expression immediately shifted from entertainer to deeply concerned human being as he noticed Linda's distress. Ellen stood up from her chair and took several steps toward the audience. "Ma'am in the fourth row, you look like you need to say something." Linda looked up, startled by the sudden attention of 400 people and multiple cameras. She clutched the medical bracelet tighter and shook her head quickly, embarrassed by her emotional display. "I'm sorry," Linda said, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and emotion. "I didn't mean to interrupt. It's just everything he said about caregiving, about invisible heroes." Ellen didn't hesitate. She walked down the steps that separated the stage from the audience, something she did only when every instinct told her someone needed to be heard. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Ellen asked, now standing directly in front of Linda's row. "Linda Walsh. I'm from Portland, Oregon." Ellen knelt down in the aisle beside Linda's row, her cream blazer spreading around her. The studio cameras adjusted to capture both women, but Ellen's focus was entirely on Linda. "Linda, tell me about that bracelet you're holding." Linda looked down at the worn medical alert bracelet, then back up at Ellen with such raw exhaustion that it made everyone in the studio understand they were witnessing something profound. "This belongs to my mother, Catherine. She has Alzheimer's, and I've been caring for her alone for 3 years. Yesterday, she wandered out of the house while I was in the shower. I found her 6 hours later, sitting in a park 3 miles away, crying because she couldn't remember how to get home." The studio fell into that particular silence that happens when hundreds of people simultaneously confront a reality too complex for simple sympathy. From the stage, Greg Kinnear leaned forward in his chair, his actor's training forgotten as he focused entirely on Linda's words, with the intensity of someone who had spent months researching exactly this situation. Ellen took Linda's hands gently, the bracelet between them. "Linda, how long has it been since you've had a break?" "I can't remember," Linda said, her voice breaking. "I quit my job 2 years ago because she can't be left alone. I haven't slept through the night and I don't know how long. My friends stopped calling because I always had to cancel plans. My own daughter barely knows me anymore because I'm always so tired, so stressed." Linda's composure cracked completely. "And the worst part is, most days she doesn't even know who I am. I gave up everything to take care of someone who looks at me like I'm a stranger, but she's my mother, and I love her, and I don't know what else to do." Ellen felt tears welling in her own eyes as she recognized the particular exhaustion of someone carrying impossible weight. "Linda, what made you decide to come to the show today?" "My neighbor forced me to take these tickets. She said she'd watch Mom for a few hours, that I needed to do something for myself. But sitting here, listening to him talk about caregiving like it's noble and beautiful," Linda gestured toward Greg. "It doesn't feel noble. It feels like drowning." Greg Kinnear, without being asked, stood up from his chair and walked to the edge of the stage. "Linda, may I come down there and talk to you?" Linda nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. Greg descended the stage steps with the careful respect of someone who understood he was approaching sacred ground. He moved to kneel beside Ellen, creating an intimate circle of 3 people connected by this moment of raw truth. "Linda," Greg said, his voice carrying that warmth that had made him America's favorite leading man. "What you're doing isn't just noble. It's the hardest job in the world, and you're doing it alone. That's not a failure of love. That's a failure of the system that's supposed to support families like yours." Linda looked at Greg with surprise. "Really?" "Really?" Greg continued. "I spent months with families like yours preparing for this role, and every single one of them said the same thing you just said, that they felt like they were drowning, that they felt guilty for resenting the situation, that they felt invisible." Ellen stood up slowly, her heart breaking for this woman who had sacrificed everything and was getting no recognition, no support, no relief. "Linda," Ellen said, "I want you to know that starting tomorrow, things are going to be different for you and your mother." Linda's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I mean we're going to connect you with respite care services so you can get regular breaks. We're going to find you a support group for caregivers, and we're going to make sure you're not doing this alone anymore." Greg reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his personal phone. "Linda, I want to give you the contact information for the Alzheimer's Association chapter in Portland. They have programs specifically for situations like yours. And I want you to know that asking for help isn't giving up on your mother. It's taking care of both of you." But Ellen wasn't finished. She began removing her cream blazer, the one that had become her signature for this season. "Linda," Ellen said, "this blazer has been with me through some of my most important interviews. But today it's witnessing something more important than any celebrity story. It's witnessing the kind of love that shows up every day without applause, without recognition, without thanks." She placed the blazer around Linda's shoulders. "I want you to keep this. And when you're having those moments when you feel like you can't do it anymore, I want you to remember that 400 people and millions of viewers saw your love for your mother, and that your sacrifice matters." The moment that brought the entire studio to tears came when Ellen asked Linda what she would want other caregivers to know. "I would want them to know that it's okay to feel angry sometimes," Linda said, her voice growing stronger. "It's okay to grieve for the person your parent used to be. It's okay to ask for help. And it's okay to take care of yourself too, because if you don't, you can't take care of anyone else." Greg stood up and addressed the cameras directly. "And I want everyone watching to know that there are Linda Walshes in every community, caring for loved ones with dementia, often completely alone. They need our support, our understanding, and our help." 6 months later, Linda Walsh appeared on the Ellen DeGeneres Show again. But this time she wasn't alone. She had regular respite care, a support group that had become like family, and most importantly, she looked rested for the first time in years. Greg Kinnear, who had helped establish a caregivers fund in Linda's honor, appeared via video to check in on her progress and announced that his film would be donating a portion of its proceeds to dementia care organizations. The segment sparked a national conversation about the isolation of family caregivers and the need for systemic support. Linda became an advocate for caregiver rights, and her story helped pass legislation providing tax credits and respite care funding for families dealing with dementia. Ellen learned that day that her job wasn't to interview famous people about their latest projects. Her job was to shine light on the invisible heroes among us, to create moments where exhausted caregivers could feel seen and supported, and to remind everyone that love sometimes looks like the hardest, most thankless work imaginable. Greg Kinnear learned that the most important performances happen not in movie theaters, but in living rooms where adult children become parents to their parents, where love persists even when recognition fades, and where ordinary people do extraordinary things every single day. And Linda Walsh learned that sometimes when you feel most alone in your struggle, that's exactly when you're surrounded by more support than you ever imagined possible. Because the most powerful stories aren't about people who save the world with grand gestures. They're about people who save one person at a time, with patience and presence, and the kind of love that shows up even when it's not convenient, even when it's not appreciated, even when nobody's watching.